From my kitchen window, I saw it all unfold. Two black and white cruisers tore down the quiet street like wolves catching a scent. They didn't stop at just any house, they stopped at Marissa Hale's. She had just stepped out of her car, groceries still in hand, when the first officer approached. Tall, stern, not asking questions, issuing orders. Even from across the road, I could feel the shift in the air. Something wasn't right. The other officer, younger, eyes darting, looked like he didn't belong in this script. And then, without a warrant, without a word more, they pushed past her and entered. Marissa didn't scream, she didn't cry, she just stood there, frozen, like watching a stranger break into your soul. I should have looked away, but I couldn't, because deep down, I knew they picked the wrong house. I stood behind the curtain, heart thudding louder than the ticking clock on my wall. From this distance, I could see Marissa gripping her keys tighter, her knuckles white against the cool metal. She wasn't yelling, but you could tell she was holding back a storm. The tall officer had already vanished into the house. The younger one hesitated at the doorway, then followed like a shadow with no spine. It didn't make sense. Marissa was the kind of neighbor who baked pies for block parties, who knew your dog's name and your birthday. But that day, the woman who once smiled across the fence looked small, like a prisoner on her own porch. I saw her mouth moving, pleading, demanding. I couldn't hear through the glass, but the answer was written all over her face. They weren't listening. Cars slowed. A couple walking their dogs stopped. Phones came out. Someone started recording. No one stepped in. Not yet. But I knew it in my gut. This wasn't a mistake. This was a line being crossed in broad daylight. And none of us were ready for what would happen when her husband came home. The door slammed open behind her. Marissa stepped in. Slow and composed, but her world was already unraveling. Drawers yanked, closet doors flung wide, photo frames shoved aside like junk mail. Her wedding china gifts wrapped in memory and meaning rattled under careless fingers. She said nothing, not because she didn't want to, but because her voice would have cracked, and she refused to let them hear her break. Instead, she stood in the hallway, watching strangers rip through the sacred quiet of her home like it was some crime scene from a movie. The young one wouldn't meet her eyes. He touched nothing, just followed, silent, guilty. But the other, the tall one, moved with a kind of practiced entitlement. He opened a jewelry box and didn't flinch when pearls spilled like tiny bones across the floor. Marissa blinked slowly. Once, twice. Her mother's pendant was gone. Her hands curled into fists, nails pressing crescent moons into her skin. She bit the inside of her cheek to keep from shaking. This wasn't a search. This was a violation. And every tick of the clock made one thing clear. They weren't here for truth. They were here because they could be. And God help them. If David walked through that door, the street went still. No siren, no rush, just the low growl of a black sedan gliding to the curb. The door opened, and out stepped David Hale. 6'2", navy suit, eyes like a storm gathering over calm water. You didn't need to know who he was. The silence that followed told you everything. He didn't run. He walked, each step deliberate, like a man who didn't need volume to dominate a room, just presence. Inside, the taller officer froze mid-rifle through a drawer. The younger one backed away, hands instinctively behind his back. Marissa turned. Relief didn't flood her face. She didn't collapse into his arms. She simply nodded once. That was all he needed. "What's happening in my house?" David asked, voice low but razor sharp. The tall officer stammered, "Sir Commissioner Hale, we received a report and you acted without a warrant, entered a private residence, ignored the occupant's protest." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Every word landed like a gavel. "You disrespected my wife. You disregarded protocol. You broke the law." The silence was deafening. "I suggest," he said coldly, "you stop whatever this is, now." The officers stood paralyzed, caught not just by fear, but by the unbearable weight of being seen for what they truly were. And then, A voice broke the air. But it wasn't David's. It wasn't authorized. The words didn't come from David. They came from behind him. All eyes turned to the younger officer, Tyler Grant, 27, 2 years on the force, sweat beading on his forehead like confessions trying to escape. He took one step forward, then another. His voice trembled but didn't break. Commissioner Hale, I was there from the start. This search, it wasn't cleared. We had no warrant. We were told it was urgent. But he swallowed hard, looked at his partner. We shouldn't have come in. We crossed a line. The taller officer's face turned to stone. We were following orders. He muttered. David's eyes narrowed. You followed them straight into illegal territory. So a hush spread through the room, even outside. The crowd seemed to lean closer. And in that moment, Tyler wasn't just an officer. He was a witness, a whistleblower, a risk-taker. You could see it in his hands how they shook, in his jaw how tightly it clenched. But you could also see something else: relief, because for the first time in this whole mess, someone chose to stand up instead of stand by. And the weight of truth, it didn't crush him. It lifted him. The footage hit the internet before the sun went down. By morning, it was everywhere. Commissioner Hale confronts rogue officers. Unlawful search caught on camera. Young cop speaks truth against his own unit. News vans circled the block. Reporters knocked on doors. Microphones hovered. But David said little. His actions spoke louder. Within 48 hours, disciplinary hearings began. The lead officer was suspended without pay. Internal Affairs opened an investigation. Policies were re-examined. But the story didn't end in punishment. It ignited something bigger. David Hale, known for his quiet resolve, stepped into the spotlight. Not for glory, but for reform. He didn't call it a crusade. He called it repair. Mandatory warrant review protocols, community oversight meetings, officer de-escalation retraining. And Tyler, he wasn't hailed as a hero, not right away, but quietly, slowly. People began to see what courage really looked like. Not in a headline, but in a single moment when someone with something to lose still chooses to tell the truth. And Marissa, she rebuilt her home, not just the shelves or the broken lock, but the sense of safety that was stolen from her. And she did it standing side by side with the man who reminded the system, power doesn't mean permission, and silence is never justice. Not every battle is fought with fists or fury. Sometimes, it's fought in silence on a doorstep, in a hallway, in the split second when someone chooses to speak. Marissa didn't shout, Tyler didn't run, David didn't threaten, but each of them stood up, and in doing so, reminded us justice isn't just a courtroom outcome, it's the choices we make when no one expects us to. So if this story moved something in you, a memory, a fear, a hope, don't scroll past it. Speak on it, share it, and if you haven't yet subscribed, because this isn't the only story that needs to be told, and you might be the next one who needs to hear it.